Thinking of playing Iron Cross, man-to-man combat East Front, Demyansk pocket. During the last week of February 1942, units of the Russian 34th Army attempted to penetrate the northeast sector of the German line around the Demyansk pocket. German strongpoints consisting of troops from the 30th Infantry Division held important roadways in what was a successful effort to forestall a collapse of the pocket. Really enjoying playing. really enjoying playing this game. Wow, big surprise again. Let me go over some notes first. Note number one here, and this is both important and interesting. Before, I thought that in this combat here, I thought when the Germans failed their observation attempt, I just assumed that I would remove my reminder markers here because the process starts over again, so to speak. But after thinking about it later, I just thought, wait, I think I'm reading too much into it. I think that because the modifier is just, and this is for observation again, so the observer gets a positive diral modifier if the observed units were observed in a previous turn, so it's also not the same turn. And I thought about that. I think that's because action is assumed to be all going on at the same time. So a previous turn, the observed units were successfully observed. But that's it. So I think that when you go to observe again, and it says, and neither the observer nor the observed have moved. And that's why I'm marking both. The original observers and the observed units. So as long as they haven't moved, I think the markers remain, which means that the diral modifier remains. Of course, what we have is an example here of they still fail to observe. But I think that, and I thought about why this is. I think that the German soldiers still have an idea that the Soviets are there, but that doesn't mean that they're going to positively observe them for targeting every single turn. So when I thought through it, it made sense to me, and I do think that the markers stay because the diral modifier remains. As long as those, it's only a diral modifier. It's not saying it's automatic observation. Okay, note number two. Note number two is about the machine gun attack, the German machine gun attack across to the Russians in the multi-hex building. So I put everything back together here. So they have fired. They have fired in the second phase, which also happens to be the support fire phase. What's the actual name? The actual name is support fire phase. And they have observed those Russians in the multi-hex building. So I put everything back together here, and thinking about this, I wanted to experiment with the odds of firing, but firing at, I think it's 180 meters away into a large building is, it's not realistic that the Germans would have much success, and that's what I'm finding, and that's good. That's good. Probably a better use of the machine guns. Now, the other thing I was thinking about is that now I think, so basically, well, let me show the Russians. So there are the Russians over there in a multi-hex building. And here's the German medium machine gun. Basically, the German player knows, they know the Russians are there, but they also know the Russians have to come out. And I just see something wrong, or not wrong, but I wonder why. Anyways, okay. The Germans know that the Russians have to come out of the building, and the direct fire the direct fire against Russians in the building is not effective. But once they come out of the building and they're in the open, obviously the direct fire is going to be more effective. But now I'm thinking, I didn't check on this, but earlier I was thinking, yeah, within initial range. So now I'm thinking that now's the time to think about other machine gun modes. In other words, the German player might want to do a fire lane that goes right like that, that basically maybe the German thinks that the Russians have to pass that line. Or maybe, which is what I think I'm going to do, is the Germans are now going to think about switching to spray fire. And spray fire is going to allow them to attack multiple targets within their initial range and their frontal hexes. So, but the reason why I'm talking about this is that when I'm playing solo, I'm just thinking about the best possible choices, and I think that's the best choice for the Germans to consider switching to spray fire. But what I'm thinking about in playing face to face, that should be a fun, sub game of making those decisions correctly or not, right? Because the German player in a face-to-face game, the German player would change that. I'm assuming the rules don't negate this or disallow this, but I think the German player is going to change that machine gun mode without the Russian player knowing it. So basically the Russian player is going to find out when the German machine gun opens up with a bunch of area fire or spray fire. So that's pretty cool. I like that. All right, so note number 3. Note number 3 is related to the machine guns again. I mean, that German medium machine gun is wasting ammunition. So with the ammunition rules, which again are I consider an absolute must at a game for this scale and scope, they're wasting ammunition. So by the ammunition rules alone, there are reasons to hold off on fire until they have better targets. Okay, just one more thing for the sport fire phase before we move on to the German movement. And I'm doing this just to exercise the rule. I think it's really neat, by the way. Okay, so normally machine guns for both players can change voluntarily to any mode during the morale phase at the start of the turn. In addition to that, and this is really neat, I think, and I'm glad this is, again, is just a strategy and tactics magazine game, but anyways, at any time during the turn that a unit is eligible to fire, so Albrecht here with his light machine gun, he's eligible to fire during this support fire phase. So anytime a unit is eligible to fire, a unit may attempt to change modes, and it's a PC check. It's a proficiency check. So, all right, there we go. He rolls Snake Eyes, so that would be a nice roll to have on one of those long shot fire attacks, because that would have been an automatic elimination. But so his proficiency rating is 9. He easily gets that. So I'm going to switch Albrecht here to spray fire, because all those Russians are coming up over Hill Juliet there. And where'd my pencil go? There it is. So just to show real quickly, he's LMG Charlie. I have marked direct fire. I'm going to switch it to spray mode. Okay, and then we'll do, I don't think the Germans are going to move, so we'll probably be moving on to the reaction movement phase for the Russians. All right, so the reaction movement phase is the non-phasing player. So I turned the board around, I'm looking back. It's still the German player turn, but the Russians are doing the reaction movement. Basically, it's limited movement. Basically, normal status infantry are going to get 3 movement points. And crude weapons move 1 hex. Okay, so basically, okay, so the first thing is, let's look at this 6. What this 6 is telling me is that this stack right here fired in the previous phase number 6, which, okay, we're in the, here, I'll show you the computation I'm looking at. So we're in the reaction movement phase here. I'm going to go back 3 phases, skipping the morale phase. 1, 2, skip the morale phase, 3. Right, I go back, so I'm going back to the assault phase of the Russian player turn before. But they fired in the 6th phase, or the moving fire phase. So in other words, there are 4 phases before, and so I don't think that I need to record this anymore, because again, all of the modifiers that I have seen for previous fire all say the previous 3 phases, skipping the morale phase. Okay, and this can come off too, because they're eligible to fire again. I mean, they were already eligible, but okay. Now this is interesting. They already fired, and I forgot, which is why I have the memory cue here. So they fired in the support fire phase, and isn't that interesting? Basically, my thinking is that fire, basically this was a mistake to fire in the support fire phase, because it's not really support fire. In other words, though, they should not have fired during the support fire phase, because they weren't actually supporting anything. So they actually should have waited, obviously. In retrospect, they should have waited, used opportunity fire against the Russians, and then if the Russians didn't even move, they wind up firing, they get to fire in the moving fire phase anyways. So, yeah. The machine gun as well back there has also fired. So, and in any case, if for opportunity fire, they're, wait a minute, for opportunity fire, they're limited, the limited range anyways. I have to keep remembering that. But in any case, the support fire phase was kind of useless. All right, so these guys are moving forward into the open and try to take their chances. These guys are moving forward too. So remember, I'm giving them 3 movement points if they're normal status infantry, 1 hex for pinned infantry, and 1 hex for crude weapons normal status.